The cabin of Atlantic Flight 292 was quiet, filled only with the low, steady hum of the jet engines cruising at 35,000 feet. Outside the scratched plastic window of seat 11F, the sky was turning a deep bruise-colored purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was 7:45 p.m., and most passengers were dozing after the meal service, lulled by the monotony of cross-country travel. In seat 11F sat Maya Vance, a girl who looked no older than 16, though she had just turned 19 the week before. She was curled against the cabin wall, wearing an oversized gray hoodie, her knees pulled up slightly. On her lap rested an old, worn leather flight jacket that was 3 sizes too big for her, its patches faded with time. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Maya ran her fingers over the embroidered wings on the jacket's chest, a nervous habit she couldn't stop. To the flight attendants passing by, she was just another unaccompanied minor or a tired college student heading home. Nobody noticed the way her eyes constantly scanned the cabin, or how she instinctively braced her core whenever the plane hit a minor pocket of turbulence. She had grown up in hangars, smelling jet fuel instead of perfume, raised by a single father who was a legend in the Air Force. But he was gone now, and she was just a kid in a window seat, traveling alone with his memory. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't dramatic. It was a sound that shouldn't have been there. At 8:12 p.m., the pitch of the engines changed dramatically, shifting from steady whine to a lower, grinding thrum. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, and then dimmed to half power. A few reading lights popped off completely. Maya sat up straight, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew that sound. It wasn't just an engine throttling back for descent. It was a power fluctuation in the main electrical bus. Up ahead in the galley, she heard the distinct, sharp chime of the cockpit calling the flight attendants, rapidly, 3 times in a row. That was the signal for a serious emergency. A flight attendant, a kind-faced woman named Sarah who had given Maya extra pretzels earlier, hurried up the aisle toward the cockpit door, her face pale and tight with worry. She knocked using the security code, but there was no answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The plane began to bank slowly to the left, drifting off its assigned flight path. Panic is a slow-moving wave in a confined space. It started with murmurs of confusion as the in-flight movies froze on the screens. Then came the nervous questions directed at the flight attendants, who were now hurrying through the aisles, checking seat belts with frantic motions, their professional smiles gone. The plane continued its slow, uncommanded turn. Up front, Sarah was on the interphone, trying desperately to reach the pilots. Maya could hear her voice rising in pitch, cracking with fear. "Captain? First officer? Please respond. We have a situation in the cabin." The silence from behind the reinforced cockpit door was heavier than any scream. Something catastrophic had happened up there, a rapid decompression that knocked them out, or perhaps a toxic fume event. Whatever it was, nobody was flying the plane. Maya clutched the leather jacket tighter. She knew exactly what happened next when an airliner went silent and went off course in post 9/11 airspace. At 8:25 p.m., at an Air National Guard base 300 miles away, the klaxons began to blare. 2 pilots of the alert squadron were sprinting toward their hangars before the alarm even finished its first cycle. Major Thomas Ryland, call sign Hammer, and his wingman, Lieutenant Chloe Gartner, call sign Snap, were strapped into their F-22 Raptors and taxiing within minutes. Their briefing came over the secure radio as they blasted into the darkening sky, afterburners glowing like twin pillars of fire. The mission was stark and terrifying. Intercept a non-responsive commercial airliner that was veering toward a major metropolitan area. They were to make visual contact, attempt communication on all guard frequencies, and if the plane showed hostile intent or threatened populated areas, they were to shoot it down. It was the order every fighter pilot dreaded, the mission that kept them awake at night. Back in seat 11F, Maya felt the shift in pressure as the plane began a shallow descent. The passengers around her were crying now, some praying, others frantically trying to send text messages that wouldn't go through. Then, a gasp rippled through the cabin. Someone on the right side of the plane screamed and pointed out the window. Maya leaned across the empty middle seat to look. There, keeping perfect pace with the airliner, was a dark gray shape that looked like a sleek, predatory bird. It was an F-22 Raptor. Its presence was terrifyingly majestic. To the civilians on board, it was a sign of doom, proof that they were in mortal danger. To Maya, it was a terrifying comfort. She knew the protocols. The fighter jet was sliding into position near the cockpit, trying to get the pilot's attention, trying to see inside. Hammer brought his F-22 alongside the airliner's nose. It was 8:40 p.m. He could see the cockpit windows clearly in the twilight. What he saw chilled him. Both pilots were slumped forward in their harnesses, motionless. Their oxygen masks were dangling and used. "Snap! I have visual on the cockpit," Hammer said over the radio, his voice tight. "Crew is incapacitated. Looks like hypoxia. Nobody is driving the bus." The airliner was slowly losing altitude, its autopilot likely disengaged by the electrical fault, drifting aimlessly toward the sprawling city lights glowing far below. The air defense sector controller came on the radio, their voice flat and deadly serious. "Hammer flight, if you cannot re-establish control of the aircraft before it crosses the outer marker, you are authorized to engage." Hammer swallowed hard. He was minutes away from having to fire a missile at a plane full of innocent people. He tried the emergency radio frequency again, broadcasting on guard. "Unknown airliner. This is United States Air Force F-22 on your left wing. If you can hear me, rock your wings. Acknowledge immediately." The airliner continued its slow, deadly drift. Inside the cabin, the lead flight attendant, Sarah, was weeping openly near the galley. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up, ignoring the shouts of passengers telling her to sit down. She walked to the front galley, clutching the leather jacket. "I can help," Maya said, her voice shaking but clear. Sarah looked at her, bewildered. "Sweetheart, go back to your seat. Please." Maya shook her head fiercely. "My dad was Colonel Vance. I grew up on air bases. I know the radio protocols. I know what those jets out there are going to do if we don't talk to them. Let me try the interphone again. Maybe the cockpit radio is still working even if the door is locked." It was a desperate, crazy idea, but Sarah was out of options. She handed Maya the cabin interphone handset. Maya pressed the button to connect to the cockpit radio system, praying the auxiliary power was still feeding it. She put the headset against her ear and heard the static hiss of the emergency frequency. Then, she heard Hammer's voice, stern and demanding. "Last warning. Turn west immediately or you will be engaged." Maya pressed the transmit button on the handset. Her hands were sweating. Fighter aircraft. This is Atlantic 292. Do you read?" There was a beat of stunned silence on the frequency. In his cockpit, Hammer was startled. The voice was young, female, and terrified. It sounded like a kid. "Atlantic 292. This is USAF F-22. Who is this? Where are the pilots?" Hammer demanded, his suspicion instantly raised. Was this a trick? Was a hijacker using a hostage to stall? Maya took a deep breath. "The pilots are out cold. I think it's the oxygen. I'm a passenger. We don't know how to fly the plane. Please don't shoot us." Hammer felt sick. A kid. "Listen to me," Hammer said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You need to find someone who can fly. We cannot let this aircraft continue on its current heading." Maya looked around the panicked cabin. There was nobody. "There's no one," she whispered into the mic. "It's just us." The controller came back on the radio to Hammer. "Hammer lead, time is up. The aircraft is 10 miles from the populated center. Execute the mission." Hammer's finger hovered near the weapons switch. He couldn't do it. He couldn't vaporize a plane with a scared kid on the radio. But he had his orders. "Atlantic 292, I have my orders," Hammer said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm sorry." Maya heard the finality in his tone. She knew what came next. She looked down at the leather jacket in her lap, at the faded wings. Her father had taught her things, secret things he said she should only use if the world was ending. This felt like the end of the world. She needed to make the pilot stop. She needed to prove she wasn't just a panicked civilian, but someone who understood the stakes and deserved to be listened to. She needed to speak his language. She keyed the microphone one last time, channeling every ounce of courage her father had instilled in her. When she spoke, her voice didn't shake. It was steel. Hammer lead, hold your fire. This is Viper 3 Actual, Authentication Whiskey Tango Foxtrot 9. I am invoking the Archangel Protocol. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. At 8:52 p.m., 2 miles above the Earth, Major Thomas Hammer, Ryland froze in his cockpit. His breath caught in his throat. The call sign, Viper 3, was legendary in the fighter community. It belonged to Colonel Vance, one of the greatest tacticians who ever flew, a man who had died a hero's death years ago. And Archangel Protocol, that was a highly classified distress code from the Cold War era, something only senior officers and their immediate families would ever know about. It was a plea for absolute protection in a catastrophic scenario. No random kid could possibly know that sequence. Hammer, did you copy that? Lieutenant Gartner asked from the other F-22, shock evident in her voice. She used an Archangel code. Hammer immediately disarmed his weapons system. The aggression evaporated from his posture. Control, Hammer lead. We have a situation. The person on the radio just authenticated with a legacy code. It's Colonel Vance's daughter. We are waving off. I repeat, we are waving off the engagement. Hammer brought his jet in closer, right off the wingtip, so close Maya could see his helmet visor. His voice on the radio changed completely. It was no longer the voice of an executioner. It was the voice of a guardian. Viper 3 Actual, this is Hammer. I hear you loud and clear. We're standing down. We got your back, kid. You are not alone up there. Maya slumped against the galley wall, tears of pure relief streaming down her face. They weren't going to shoot, but they were still falling. Hammer, we're still going down. I don't know what to do, she cried into the radio. Hammer's voice was rock steady now. Okay, Viper, here's the plan. We're going to guide you. I need you to get that flight attendant to find the biggest person on that plane and break down that cockpit door. You need to get oxygen on those pilots. We will stay right here with you. We're going to herd you away from the city. The next 20 minutes were a blur of terrifying action. Under Hammer's calm direction relayed through Maya, passengers used a beverage cart to smash open the cockpit door. Sarah managed to get emergency oxygen masks onto the unconscious pilots. The first officer groaned, sputtering as the pure oxygen hit his system. He was groggy, barely conscious, but he was able to understand Maya as she relayed Hammer's instructions to level the wings and pull up. The big airliner groaned as it pulled out of its shallow dive, just thousands of feet above the suburban rooftops. The two F-22s stayed glued to the airliner's wings like guardian angels made of titanium and radar-absorbent materials. They escorted the crippled plane to the nearest major airport, clearing the airspace ahead of them. Hammer talked them through every mile, his voice a constant anchor in the chaos. When the wheels of Atlantic 292 hit the runway with a screech of burning rubber at 9:25 p.m., fire trucks were already racing alongside it. The plane came to a stop, and the slides deployed. Passengers evacuated, shaken but alive. Maya was one of the last to leave, still clutching her father's jacket. As she stood on the tarmac, bathed in the flashing red lights of emergency vehicles, a dark AirForce staff car pulled up. Major Ryland got out. He was still in his flight suit, carrying his helmet. He looked exhausted, his face lined with the stress of a near-impossible decision he almost had to make. He walked straight to Maya. He didn't see a kid in a hoodie. He saw the daughter of a hero, someone who had stared down death with the same icy nerve as her father. He stopped in front of her and slowly, crisply, snapped a sharp salute. It wasn't a courtesy salute. It was a salute of genuine respect between warriors. You saved a lot of lives today, Viper, Hammer said, his voice thick with emotion. Your dad would have been incredibly proud. Maya returned the salute, her hand trembling slightly near her brow. For the first time since her father died, she didn't feel just like a kid left behind in the shadowy wake of a giant. She felt like she belonged to the sky, just like he did.